Having established control over most of the Danelaw, Edward I began to make plans to include the Northumbrian territory, which was the last kingdom of the Danes, Jorvik, into his kingdom. Since the Anglo-Saxons had much more forces than the Danes, Edward I could count on victory, but on July 17, 924, he dies without realizing his plans. The English king had two sons, Ethelbert and Ethelstan, who could take the throne, since Edward did not have time to appoint an heir before his death. Ethelstan, during the life of his father, managed to prove himself as a brave warrior during the battles with the Danes and enjoyed the support of the Mercian nobility, since he had lived in Mercia since childhood. The problem was that Ethelstan was the son of a simple shepherdess, so the Witenagemot chose Ethelbert as the new king of England, who could not boast of military merit, but at the same time his mother was from a noble family. To avoid confrontation between the brothers, Mercia was given to Ethelstan along with the title of king. On August 2, 924, the new king of England, Ethelbert, dies unexpectedly. It should be noted that some sources claim that Ethelbert's death was not accidental, but he was killed on the orders of Ethelstan. Upon learning of the death of his brother, Ethelstan immediately proclaimed himself king of England, but not everything was so simple. Ethelstan had a new rival for the throne in the person of his half-brother Edwin. Fortunately for Ethelstan, power was on his side, thanks to which, after a long struggle for power, he managed to get rid of his opponent, and on September 4, 925 he was officially recognized as King of England. Even after Ethelstan's coronation, England was unsettled. The new king had to suppress the uprisings of new pretenders to the throne. In the end, Ethelstan managed to suppress all the rebellions and consolidate his power in England, after which he turned his attention to the last kingdom of the Danes. Despite the fact that the English army outnumbered the army of the kingdom of Jorvik, Ethelstan was in no hurry to start a war. Instead, he tried to use diplomatic methods to increase his influence over the realm of Jorvik. On January 30, 926, Ethelstan gave one of his sisters in marriage to King Sigtryg of York, who in turn agreed to be baptized and recognized the supreme authority of the English king. In this way, Ethelstan would have been able to expand his sphere of influence without resorting to military force, if the King of York had not died in the summer of 927. Immediately after the death of Sigtryg, his son from his first marriage Olaf Kvaran, as well as his brother King Guthfrith of Dublin, who arrived from Ireland, were proclaimed the new kings of York. The new rulers of York did not plan to comply with the agreements of Sigtryg and Ethelstan, refusing to recognize the supreme authority of the English crown. In this situation, Ethelstan began to act swiftly. He gathered a large army and hastily advanced on the campaign. The Danes were not ready for such a scenario and could not organize serious resistance. Thus, the Anglo-Saxons succeeded in crushing the resistance of the Danes to occupy York and establish control over the entire kingdom. Since Guthfrith and Olaf did not plan to surrender, but at the same time they perfectly understood that the kingdom of Jorvik did not have enough strength to fight the Anglo-Saxon army, they fled to Dublin, planning to raise an army and regain their lost possessions. In turn, Ethelstan focused on strengthening his kingdom. On May 25, 934, Ethelstan again gathered a large army and began to march north. Very soon, the Anglo-Saxon army invaded the kingdom of Strathclyde and defeated the local army. Inspired by the success, Ethelstan continued the campaign and invaded the territory of the Kingdom of Alba. The local army was also unable to resist the numerically superior army of the Anglo-Saxons and was defeated. As a result of the campaign to the north, Ethelstan managed to force the kings of Alba and Strathclyde to recognize vassal dependence on the English crown. Of course, the kings of Alba and Strathclyde were unhappy with this development of the situation, but they did not have enough strength to confront the English kingdom. Therefore, they entered into an alliance with King Olaf of Dublin, who was the son of the former King Guthfrith of York and very much wanted to return the lost lands. The resulting union had enough strength to resist the army of the Anglo-Saxons. Preparations for the coming war began. In 937, the kings of Alba and Strathclyde, at the head of their armies, invaded the territory of the English kingdom. Some time later, King Olaf of Dublin joined them with his army. The allied army, having united, set up camp near the city of Brunanburh, so that, having rested, continue moving into the depths of England. Meanwhile, Aethelstan, having learned about the invasion of his territory, hurried to meet the enemy army at the head of his army. The Allied camp was located at the mouth of the Mercia River. In turn, Aethelstan, having reached the vicinity of the enemy's camp, set up his camp nearby. Aethelstan was in a hurry and did not have time to gather all the available forces, so he needed to delay the start of the battle as much as possible. That is why Aethelstan sent a message to the allies offering to pay them a ransom if they leave the territory of the English kingdom. So that the opponents would not guess that he was playing for time in the hope of waiting for the approach of additional forces, Aethelstan ordered his people to put up additional tents, creating the appearance of a huge army. The negotiations lasted 3 days. Of course, it was not possible to agree, but this time was enough for additional forces to arrive in Aethelstan's camp, which provided him with a numerical superiority over the enemy. On the morning of the 4th day, both armies began preparations for the upcoming battle. As for the number of warring parties, there is no exact data. At the same time, historians agree that under the command of Aethelstan there were about 10,000 soldiers, while in the united army of the Allies there were no more than 9,000 soldiers. Early in the morning, having formed battle formations, both armies rushed to the attack. Very soon, a bloody hand-to-hand fight began. Since both armies consisted of experienced warriors, the battle lasted a long time, but neither side could win. At noon, the bloody battle continued. At this point, Aethelstan decided to use the main advantage of his army, namely the cavalry, the presence of which his opponents could not boast. The Anglo-Saxon cavalry rapidly attacked the flanks of the Allied army, which, tired of a long hand-to-hand fight and not expecting a flank attack, could not offer worthy resistance. Due to the attack of the Anglo-Saxon cavalry, the combat formation of infantry detachments on the flanks of the Allies was destroyed, and they began to flee the battlefield to save their lives. Very soon, the morale of the remnants of the Allied troops was broken, and it began to flee. Aethelstan's men began to pursue the enemy in order to inflict maximum damage on him. Having won a victory at Brunanburh, Aethelstan reached the peak of his power. The supreme power of the English king was recognized by all the rulers of Britain. It was at this time that Aethelstan assumed the title of King of all Britain. In turn, King Olaf of Dublin, who was able to leave the battlefield and return to Ireland, did not want to give up plans to regain control of the Kingdom of York. On October 27, 939, Aethelstan dies, and since he was not married and had no children, his brother, Edmund I, became the new King of England. This was taken advantage of by the King of Dublin, Olaf, who gathered a large army and invaded the territory of the English kingdom. Olaf's invasion was a complete surprise for the new English king, so he could not organize serious resistance. Olaf's army, having landed on the coast, quickly took possession of the territory of the Kingdom of York. Inspired by the success, Olaf's army continued the offensive. The Anglo-Saxons tried to organize a defense, but they could not hold back the onslaught of the enemy army, as a result of which Olaf's army managed to occupy the cities of Derby, Lincoln, Nottingham, Leicester and Stamford, as well as the surrounding territories. Olaf, realizing that he was lucky, planned to continue the offensive and occupy the entire territory of the Danelaw, but in 941 he died without having time to realize his plans. After Olaf's death, his cousin Olaf Kvaran became the new King of York, and the late Olaf's brother Blacair became King of Dublin. Since a significant part of the soldiers returned to Dublin, Olaf could not continue the offensive deep into England. This was taken advantage of by Edmund I, who, having gathered his strength, managed to regain control over the territory of the region of 5 cities by 943. Edmund planned to continue the offensive and gather his strength to regain control of York, but the Archbishop of York managed to try on 2 kings. The peace did not last long. In 944, Olaf, at the head of his army, violated the peace treaty and invaded the territory of the English kingdom, plundering the border areas. In response, Edmund, having gathered a large army, invaded the territory of the enemy. Taking advantage of the numerical advantage, he managed to capture York and the entire territory of Jorvik, forcing Olaf, along with his close associates, to flee to Dublin. In 947, the new King of England transferred power over Jorvik to Eric Bloodaxe, who, having lost the Norwegian throne, arrived with his troops in Britain. In 954, Eric Bloodaxe died in battle, after which the kingdom of Jorvik became part of England. This was the end of the story of the last Viking kingdom in Britain. If you like this video, be sure to subscribe to my channel and click on the bell so as not to miss new videos.